Military sexual trauma is an experience, not a diagnosis or a condition, and people react in a variety of ways that has a direct impact on the relationships we have with friends, extended family, intimate partners, and children. MST does not discriminate. People of all genders, ages, sexual orientations, racial and ethnic backgrounds, and branches of service have experienced this trauma. I'm Ashley Rabolja, and I'm a survivor of military sexual trauma. Because this is such a deeply personal issue to me, I've returned to host this special American Legion Tango Alpha Lima podcast series. As the American Legion shines a light on veteran suicide, we would be remiss if we did not discuss military sexual trauma, which we know is a pervasive problem with lasting effects on the mental health of survivors' family and community. In this series, be aware, we will be discussing topics that are sensitive and potentially triggering. So take a pause and take a break as needed. Join me as we explore the ramifications of MST, share the stories of resilience, and identify resources and tools for those in need of assistance. Together, we will celebrate triumph and tragedy. Alphas, welcome back to this special series. Today, we have two guests from the Department of Defense Sexual Assault Prevention and Response Office, otherwise known as SAPRO. Dr. Nate Galbreath is the Deputy Director, and also joined with us today is Dr. Andra Tharp, whom is a Senior Prevention Advisor. We are going to be talking with them today about DoD and what they are doing to prevent military sexual trauma and the resources available for victims. Thank you both for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having us here.
Excellent, excellent. So let's go ahead and let's jump right into it. Let's start things off by talking about each of your individual roles within SAPRO and how your office fits in within the larger scope of DoD.
Well, sure. Thank you once again for having us both here today. Both Dr. Tharp and I lead the SAPRO office, and the SAPRO is at the Department of Defense level. It's within the Office of the Secretary of Defense, and the office is responsible for policy and for oversight of all efforts to respond to and prevent sexual assault throughout the department. We don't do the military justice part or the criminal investigative part. We are purely victim assistance and prevention. As the Deputy Director, I've been the Acting Director of the office now for a couple of years. And my background is a clinical psychologist with also experience in criminal investigation and also forensic science. And I spent a number of years treating and assessing sex offenders at the Johns Hopkins Outpatient Sex Offender Clinic in downtown Baltimore, and also am retired from the U.S. Air Force after about 21 years. And I've been with SAPRO in one form or another for about 15 years now. Dr. Tharp, over to you.
Great, thanks again for having us. So I'm Andra Tharp, and I've been with SAPRO for about 4 years. I'm a clinical psychologist by training, but moved right from that work into really taking a public health approach, and joined the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention for about 7 years. After that, I moved to Headquarters Air Force and then to SAPRO, and I've been leading both the sexual assault prevention work within the department, but also one of our newer areas, which is taking a more holistic look at prevention and how we can address multiple harmful behaviors at once. And that's what we refer to as integrated prevention. So thanks again for having us today.
Absolutely. Thank you for expanding on all of the amazing qualifications and work that you're doing in this space. It's much appreciated. But we'll roll over into the next question. So how is DoD tackling the issue of military sexual trauma, and what specific actions are being taken to prevent and respond to sexual assaults?
I'll kick us off, and then I'll hand it over to Dr. Tharp, just so that your listeners know that there are some differences between the Department of Defense and and Veterans Affairs. Military sexual trauma is defined as a screening term that the Department of Veteran Affairs uses to describe instances of sexual assault and sexual harassment that someone might have experienced during their military career. They have that combined definition of military sexual trauma because they are a treatment and benefit agency that essentially wants to catch a very broad net and ensure that anyone who's experienced these things can get access to the mental and physical health care that they need, as well as apply for claim benefits to along with other folks that have experienced other kinds of trauma throughout their military career and injury. So that's why MST is used at the VA. In the department, we have responsibility not only for treating those issues as well, but also responding to them and preventing them. And so we do have separate offices that address sexual assault, and that's DoD SAPRO that addresses sexual assault. And then in addition to that, we have the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion that addresses all forms of harassment, including sexual assault, in the response version of that. And as Dr. Tharp mentioned, her responsibilities include prevention of both of those as well. And we'll talk about how those are connected on the same, what we call continuum of harm. In other words, sexual harassment, sexual assault are highly connected. And Dr. Tharp will tell you about that in just a moment. So one of the things that is fundamentally changed in the past couple of years with regard to how the department assesses and looks at sexual assault is that when the current Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, entered his role as the Secretary in January of 2021, he one of the first things that he did was to ask everyone, what were we doing in the department to address sexual assault? And then he took a look at what everyone did and said, we need to do more. We need to make some very, very significant steps forward. So from day one, he's been addressing this, and that included a number of immediate actions to address sexual assault, including our going out to installations around the world to see what kind of prevention activities were underway and how well they were doing. In addition to that, he also initiated the Independent Review Commission on Sexual Assault in the Military. And that involved 12 different commissioners looking at this problem for about 90 days, and then providing the department with a number of recommendations. All total, they made about 82 different recommendations to the department on how we could fix prevention, our climate and culture, our accountability processes within military justice, and also what we're doing to support victims and provide them better care. So there's literally a host of things there that we're doing. But what I'll do is, let me turn it over to Dr. Tharp to talk about job one, which is prevention and improving our climate. Dr. Tharp.
Sure, thank you, Dr. Galbreath. So as Dr. Galbreath mentioned, the Independent Review Commission and those approved recommendations have really been guiding our work over the past couple years. And in the areas of prevention, that has involved laying a strong foundation for a whole of department approach to sexual assault prevention, as well as those related harmful behaviors such as harassment, suicide, domestic abuse, child abuse, and retaliation. That we've taken this integrated approach, understanding that these harmful behaviors often share common risk factors or conditions. So by addressing those shared risk and protective factors, we can simultaneously address multiple harmful behaviors. So in terms of laying a foundation for this work, we're in the process of establishing a prevention workforce. We've established leadership competencies for prevention and how to oversee that workforce, as well as revising the command climate assessment process. As you can imagine, a healthy command climate is associated with the prevention of multiple harmful behaviors. So it's one of our key targets in terms of prevention and creating those climates in which sexual assault and harassment do not occur.
with that, I'll just add a couple of thoughts on what we're doing to improve accountability and response. So with regard to response, the IRC recommended that we no longer have part-time people taking care of victims. As a matter of fact, they recommended a reduction in the number of collateral duty personnel supporting victims through the justice process and also through the recovery process. There have been over 200 changes in law over the course of the past 10 to 15 years that have really made this program very helpful, but also a bit on the complicated side. It's not something that people can just walk up and begin to work in without some a very important investment in skill and capability. And that's what the IRC recognized. And so they made a recommendation that we not only improve the skills of our sexual assault response coordinators and our victim advocates that help our folks every day, but also to give them greater independence from command so that folks can report the way that they want to and get the kind of advice that they need. In addition to that, expand the skills of our SARCs and our VAs, and then also with regard to accountability, the IRC made a recommendation that fundamentally changed military justice in a way that it's never been changed before. And that is, they recommended and Congress approved a change to military justice that now takes commanders out of making prosecution decisions for sexual assault and other named offenses. And so from that standpoint, we'll now have military attorneys that are experts in this. Each office each service has an office that has a one-star general or admiral that leads the prosecution decision process that will now take commanders out of that. And essentially that approach was taken to restore faith in the military justice process, that people would no longer worry about whether or not the decision about whether or not to prosecute their case and how to prosecute it was fair or not, because there was a concern that commanders might have to make a hard decision between believing a victim that's come forward and maybe the person that was accused, that is like their favorite troop or something like that. And so now independent prosecutors will be making those decisions. It'll be similar to, not exactly, but somewhat similar to how cases are reviewed and decided in the civilian community by that district attorney or that independent prosecutor. So I'll pause and turn it back over to you.
It's exciting to hear that so many changes have been made. To mention, 200 changes to the law, the removal of commanders from, those primary decision making and removing them and putting them in the hands of competent, attorney offices, JAG representatives is positive. I find that to be incredibly forward and progressive, right? There's always just the question, why does it take so long, right? However, given the total time lapse and then how DoD supports victims of sexual assault, what does the typical time frame look like now that we have all of these decisions and changes to the law? What is the DoD doing to support victims of sexual assault and navigating that process?
Well, these things haven't taken effect just yet. For example, the changes in military justice are due to take effect in this December of 2023. So that we're all standing up our folks in education and increasing skills and things like that to be able to do that in the military justice piece. And one of the things that your listeners might not know is that now in the department, every individual that makes an unrestricted report of sexual assault also gets a military attorney to represent them throughout the military justice process. And that attorney works for the victim. So there is attorney-client privilege. And in addition to that, the attorney will also can meet with them confidentially before they decide to report to help them understand the challenges and the strengths of their case, as well as understanding more along the lines of what that military justice process is. So when these changes take effect, our Special Victims Council, that's what we call it in the Army and the Air Force. In the Navy, it's known as the Victims Legal Council. But those military attorneys will be helping victims that make a report to understand what these changes are and how they can represent them throughout that process.
Excellent. Thank you. I apologize for any confusion there. It's exciting stuff. There's so much happening, so I appreciate all the clarity. So, we've discussed a little bit about how, excuse me, DoD is supporting victims of sexual assault. Let's talk a little bit more about to catch a serial offender, or the catch program. How many people have made a report of sexual assault through catch?
That's one of the programs that we're really excited about. It took effect a few years ago. And essentially, if you're not aware of it, it started out where if you made a restricted report of sexual assault, we didn't want to just lose that information. Restricted reports allow individuals to come forward and make a report to confidentially to a sexual assault response coordinator, a victim advocate, or a healthcare provider. And that information doesn't get provided to either command or law enforcement, but it does allow the individual to access care and resources to begin their healing process. And the reason we did that started doing that in 2005 is that we recognized that people would rather suffer in silence than have to know that they have to participate in the justice process, which is rather daunting. And so in order to get people to come forward and get the care that they needed, we created this restricted report. About 20% of people that make a restricted report convert to an unrestricted report and participate in the justice process every year. It varies from year to year, but about 20%. But we wanted to do something for restricted reporters that allowed them to know that other people might be out there that experience the same thing that they did, and to know that there might be an opportunity to know about that and then decide whether or not they want to convert their report and participate in the justice process. So what the Catch a Serial Offender program does, or CATCH for short, is allows people that have made a restricted report to submit confidentially to our criminal investigators with the help of a SARP, the information about their alleged offender. So that could be the alleged offender's name. It could be their screen name from an app that they might have met the individual on, or anything else that would help us identify them. That information is then reviewed by criminal investigators from the OSI, CID, and NCIS, the organizations that investigate crime in the DoD. And then if there's a match with another victim's alleged offender or information, both of the individuals, or all the individuals that might have submitted that alleged offender's name or screen name, are notified about it, and then they can make a decision whether or not they want to convert their report and participate in the justice process. All total, since we kicked this off, there's been just over 1,600 people that have submitted something into the CATCH system, and about 10% of those are from our military service academies. And so all in all, we're very happy about how people are participating with this. And interestingly enough, not only do some people get a match, but other people decide that that was just enough time to let them convert to an unrestricted report on their own and participate in the justice process.
Thank you. That was very insightful. I had heard, a few things about this program, but that's very profound. And I believe it's a great resource and tool and opportunity for folks to help put folks away who are a serial offender.
We're even expanding it a little bit now for people who've had their restricted report disclosed by a third party that they might have told. We also allowed them to participate in the in the catch program if they decide that they are going to decline to participate in that investigation that the criminal investigators might have opened. So a few unrestricted reports are starting to go in there as well, just so that, you know, we're all about options. We want to give people as many options as possible. We know that the decision to report sexual assault is deeply personal, and so as a result, one option is not always going to be right for everybody else. So that's what we've done in this program, is just really continue to expand the kinds of things and programs that we can to give people the best options that fit their circumstances.
Absolutely. And I know that the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year of 2022 authorized DoD SAFE Helpline. And I know that that's a resource to accept sexual assault reports. What resources are available through the SAFE Helpline, and who can access these services?
Actually, that is another one that is still in the making as far as taking reports. We are currently right now, because, you know, privacy and security is so important to us, that we are currently working with the Rape, Abuse, Incest National Network, who runs the SAFE Helpline for us, to ensure that they have all the cybersecurity measures in place, so that when we do authorize them to start taking reports and start the reporting process from victims, that they can protect us information that comes in. But for your listeners who don't know about SAFE Helpline, you can go to safehelpline.org, O-R-G at the end, and you can call, click, or text for assistance through SAFE Helpline. It's open 24/7, 365. It's worldwide, and you can get it like I said, you can contact trained operators anywhere in the world. Again, these folks are people that have been trained by the Rape, Abuse, Incest National Network, the largest sexual violence advocacy group in the country. And they can help people in the military community impacted by sexual assault to understand what their reporting options are, what their care options are, and where they might be able to get that care, whether that's on base from our DoD resources or, very important, off base. RAIN is connected to all 50 states, and they have resources that military people can go to and get private and confidential information off base. And so they'll refer those folks to wherever it is they'd like to go. Another thing that I don't know if your listeners know is that we recently worked with VA, to be able to offer people, active duty folks, private counseling at vet centers around the country, with no report of your counseling going back to your command or back to the base. And so your reaching out to a vet center is also a confidential way to get the counseling and support that you might need to begin your recovery process as well. So between, like I said, between SAFE Helpline that is there to tell you about everything that's out there, and even give you a warm handoff to a sexual assault response coordinator or a victim advocate in your local area, at your local installation, or to a care provider downtown, or if you just want to go to a vet center and engage in maybe some counseling yourself, just to kind of see what they have available to you. All of those things are options that are available to you confidentially without the department knowing.
Excellent. That's wonderful information. And I would love to just kind of continue on this pathway. I'd love to know, Dr. Tharp, one of the best ways to address MST is to prevent sexual assaults from happening, right? What is the DoD's approach to prevention, and complementing what Dr. Galbreath has expanded upon? This is the public health wheelhouse. I would love to know a little bit more on prevention, and maybe the differences between prevention and integrated primary prevention, and what that looks like for military installation.
Sure. So the department's integrated prevention approach uses a similar approach as preventing any single harmful behavior. The only difference is that it targets those shared risk and protective factors that those different harmful behaviors have in common, such as substance misuse is associated with a wide range of harmful behaviors. So we have the potential to simultaneously address multiple harmful behaviors by addressing that one risk factor. But what the approach that we use to prevention has a number of characteristics. The first is that it's data-driven. At each point in the process, we're using data to inform our decisions and to inform our leaders. So for example, understanding what factors may be contributing to the harmful behavior in a given military community. And then using that data to help understand what prevention activities should be implemented, and then to determine if they're working once we've implemented them. Another aspect of our approach is that it's climate focused. Within military environments, climate plays a central role in the prevention of harmful behaviors. And we know from our data that where climates are unhealthy, service members are more likely to experience things like sexual assault. So that's a prime target for our prevention efforts. And then the third aspect is that it's comprehensive. So for oftentimes we think about prevention and training being the same thing. And training is a big part of prevention, but it's just one part. That a true public health approach to prevention has a wraparound effect, meaning that the skills that we're teaching through training are reinforced across different contexts. And in order to do that, we have a multi-pronged approach that usually consists of setting expectations of behavior with policy, teaching skills to meet those expectations, usually through training, and then creating healthy climates that reinforce those healthy decisions. And the approach that we've taken lately has moved away from a one-size-fits-all approach. We know that what may be contributing to different harmful behaviors, what actions may be needed to address them, may be different based in different military communities. So we've really driven that decision-making down to the lowest level, and that's where the prevention workforce comes in and is so critical to advise those local leaders of what their data are telling them are driving the behaviors and actions, research-based actions that could address those behaviors. So as Dr. Galbreath mentioned, one of the biggest muscle movements of the implementation of the Independent Review Commission is standing up this prevention workforce with over 2,000 new professionals that can work side by side with leaders to advise them, to use their data, to collaborate across other communities and with the civilian community surrounding them, to really ensure that we're having this comprehensive, integrated, climate-focused, and data-driven approach.
Fantastic. And I would say, just with parting words, where can we find resources, links? We've talked a little bit about the SAFE Helpline. What are some other additional resources that we can send our listeners and viewers to?
So most of the resources that we have touched on today are available on SAPRO.mil, and that would include the new policy, the Independent Review Commission roadmap, as well as those links to services and an explanation of what those options are, as Dr. Galbreath laid out. So I think the first stop shop for your listeners is probably starting with SAPR.mil. And then that'll take you to other resources that we've mentioned today.
Excellent. Thank you. Dr. Galbreath, did you have any additional resources?
Well, thank you so much. I think that'll do it for now.
Okay.
Between SAFE Helpline and SAPR.mil, you will have hours of reading and assistance available and at your fingertips.
Thank you both for being a part of this series, and we look forward to seeing all of these changes come to pass here in December.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Alphas, you can find the rest of this special series and all 4 seasons of the Tango Alpha Lima podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon, or wherever you are consuming your podcasts. Subscribe on your favorite platform so you don't miss a single episode. You can also subscribe to our weekly newsletter and send us feedback at legion.org/Tango Alpha Lima. Thank you for joining us on today's episode. Thanks for listening to the Tango Alpha Lima special series. We understand that this content can be triggering. Please know that you are not alone, and if you are in crisis or in need of support, you don't have to be enrolled in VA to connect to the Veterans Crisis Line. Dial 988, then press 1 for 24/7 confidential crisis support.